Earth is home to many creatures. Some may even consider a few of them monsters. But what of those more elusive and hidden creatures? The ones we just can't seem to find. Welcome to Monday Morning Monsters. Cryptozoologist and paranormal researcher Barnaby Jones talks about the unknown, mythical, undiscovered, and unidentified creatures from around the world, and the people who have seen them, look for them, and research them. Hear from witnesses about their encounters, as well as renowned names in the field about their work and research. Barnaby is the founder and lead investigator for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society, based in Wisconsin. CAPS travels across Wisconsin and beyond looking for connections between different phenomena and how they can all be connected. Now, your host of Monday Morning Monsters, Barnaby Jones.
Good morning, monsters. We have an amazing guest on the show today. I'm looking forward to getting into it with him. And but first of all, I wanted to get you up to date on some of the stuff that we got going on. This past week, our new episode of On the Trail of Undiscovered Beasts aired on Paraflix. And that's really cool. Our second episode is out there. Paraflix is a all paranormal streaming service platform. And it's only $3.99 a month. If you use promo code CAPS10, you get 10% off your first 3 months of service. And that's what's new. Also in news this week, just yesterday, unfortunately, we had the passing of one of the legends in our field, an author, researcher, Linda Godfrey. And unfortunately, I did not have the privilege of getting to meet her in person, but we did get a chance to speak on the phone and talk to her about some of her work and stuff. But we were going to go out in the field with her, and unfortunately, she was not able to make it. She actually got sick with a cold or something that day and couldn't come out with us. But I wanted to play a little video here that she posted on her website that kind of gives you an idea of who she was, and just kind of tribute to Linda today.
You never know where art will lead you. That's certainly the case with Linda Godfrey, an artist and writer who spent the last 2 decades chronicling cryptids, or strange creatures which may or may not exist. Her specialty, you could say, is wolfmen. Hollywood has certainly given us numerous depictions of wolfmen to feed our imaginations.
Hi!
Who are you?
Barf!
How did Linda Godfrey, a small-town wife and mother and art education major, become one of the foremost experts of werewolves, Bigfoot, and other phenomena? Linda was using her art background to create comics for a small Walworth Sunday paper called The Week. Soon she was even writing articles. During a slow news period, a curious rumor made its way into the office describing a werewolf-like creature seen by various residents in fields surrounding Elkhorn.
I told my mom I thought I saw a werewolf, and my mom believed me.
For some reason or other, it was scary enough to make you feel the hair lift up on your arm.
That thing, that was no dog.
Linda was, understandably, amused and doubtful, but she decided to follow up on the leads anyway. Eventually, Linda wrote an article detailing the strange accounts. Mind you, she never claimed the beast to be real, nor did she try to influence readers with her own biases or opinions. Nevertheless, the story caused a sensation. Elkhorn embraced the creature craze, and soon bakeries were selling werewolf-shaped cookies. Permits for werewolf hunting began to circulate, and t-shirts were made. Linda never could have imagined the impact the article would have on her life. Instead of its popularity fading away, it seemed to escalate. Soon she was writing books not only about the Beast of Bray Road, but about other urban legends as well. And Linda didn't need to hire an illustrator for her books, She used her own incredible drawing talents to bring the cryptids to life on her pages.
All right. Well, rest in peace, Linda. I'm sorry that we never got a chance to meet, but your work and your legacy will live on. And I don't think anybody in the field has not heard of Linda from your work. So, all right, guys. I see we got some comments over there in the comments section, and I want to let everybody know on Facebook there is a privacy thing, so it doesn't show your names for the comments unless you change some settings in Facebook. So if you want us to know who you are over there, morning from Australia, how you doing? But otherwise, you're free to leave comments, whatever you'd like on whatever chosen platform, or if you have any questions for today's guest as well. That's awesome. So without any further ado, I want to bring in our guest today, Mr. Robert Kryder. How you doing?
How are you doing? Good deal.
Good. All right. So I got a chance to meet you. You probably don't remember, back a couple years ago in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You were with Adam Davies and Ken Gerhard there. So
yeah, I do remember. I do remember meeting. Yeah.
Awesome. Very good. So why don't you give everybody that doesn't know who you are a little bit of a quick background of who you are and what you do?
Well, my name is Robert Kryder, and I run a research and recovery company called Kryder Exploration. We founded that company as a group in about 1994, and we went official as an LLC in 2007. And primarily, we did research and recovery of enigmatic historical things like advanced ancient technology, lost cultures like the megalith builders and such like that. Also, we were often hired to recover enigmatic specimens, be it mineral, metals from maybe an advanced culture, and as well biologic specimens for the Bigfoot and stuff like that. We didn't actually start doing the heavy Bigfoot work until about 2010, but we have been working in an official capacity as a recovery team since 1994.
Very interesting. There's I've been listening to some of your other podcasts and stuff that you've been on, and you are a fascinating individual with so much to unpack here. So I appreciate you coming on, and we're not going to be able to get to everything, so I want to get to as much as possible here. So first of all, you I want to start with the most recent thing, and correct me if I'm wrong on this because I've just kind of been following along on Facebook here, but you received a report of like a flying pterosaur by where you live, correct?
Yeah, matter of fact, only about 1.5 miles from our house where it is right now. Yeah, we're on the edge of the city, basically. So it basically, when you're at our place, it looks like you're out in the remote rural area, but we're only about 1 mile out of the town. And then about 1 more mile or 1.5 miles from us on one of the local little creek beds there, yeah, we had a pterosaur sighting.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think you said that you were looking for it and stuff and didn't find anything, and then you were out on a Bigfoot expedition coming home, and it found you.
Yeah, it was this creek has a little bridge and stuff, and the witness stated that they saw it at about 30 feet away, only about 15 foot off the ground or off above the bridge, and so they got a really, really clear view of it, enough to see the texture of the skin. And I was just telling the guys on the Colorado Bigfoot expedition on the way back, Jason Kenzie and some others, and anyway, let's see who was there. Joe Parsons, I believe, was there with us, and yeah, so all three of us were kind of talking about it. And we just dropped into the valley about 40 miles from where the initial sighting happened, and no more than 5 minutes after I told them, yeah, this is the valley they live in right here. Yeah, one flew over the car from right to left, about 30 feet in front of the car, only about 15 feet off the ground. And it arced and turned right when it went by us. So we got a really good view. We got a few wing flaps, which was so fluid, even more fluid than a bird. It was unreal. I mean, thing looked like it was made out of rubber. It was really, really cool watching it fly. Yeah. And it was probably only 2.5 feet long and with a 3-foot wingspan, something like that. So either a small type or species, or a juvenile or a young. And so we had also accounts of them full sized here and even taking livestock. So we assume that those are young.
Now, you did the expedition in Colorado? Are you in Colorado then, where the sighting was, or?
No, I got invited up by TAPS, TAAPS research team to join them and Jason Kenzie as also filming part of a documentary up there. And so we were just invited up and went up there. We're actually located in New Mexico, north central, or actually we're on the east side of the state now.
So that's where you saw the flying dinosaur creature?
Yeah. Matter of fact, just north of what would be I-40, about 5 miles north of I-40, about 40 miles from the Texas border.
Very cool. So for the people out there, obviously, people don't always say that these things exist or are out there, that maybe you saw a bird or something. What do you how does this thing differ from a bird?
Well, for one, it had a triangular head, didn't have a head with a separate beak, the top of the head like this and the beak coming out. Basically, the whole head was one triangle, and it had a small pitch a small point at the back, and a little bit of a neck, with a little bend in it, almost like a stork or something would have, a little bit shorter. And then, but the tail, mainly at a glimpse, we could tell pretty easy because in the overall, you're like, what? That's not a bird. It looks like a little dragon. But those are the key points. The tips of the wings and the from where there's small protrusions on the tips of the wings. I guess that would be from the claws, and birds don't have that, and you can definitely see those sticking up, and the way the angle of that wing went. So the wing never totally had a flat edge on the front. It always had kind of a triangle edge at the end from those claw tips to the point was a triangle. And then the tail. So the tail was just a long, thin stripe, basically with a small spade looking shape on the end, like a little paddle, and real thin and real straight. And that segment didn't seem very rigid, like feathers would be. It actually undulated as the body undulated. So quite a bit different than, it actually looked quite a bit different than a bird. And then you couldn't see its feet, so that they're either tucked tightly into the body or whatever like that. So we couldn't see its feet in its outline. So.
So you got a really good look at this thing.
Yeah. Just right when we passed under it, we were probably 30 feet from it. And then it just angled right next to the car. It was probably stayed, as we're approaching pretty fast. So we're doing 55, 60. And so as we're approaching, it's already over the road, we just passed right under it and it was turning next to us. So that whole view, we got that whole thing, almost a little frontal view and then a total side view.
Very cool. So you said that there's been a couple sightings and stuff in the area, and even animal kidnappings or attacks.
Yeah, right after I posted the initial report that we had from the other guy, one of the local ranchers said, that's no bull, and they get big and they're flying between this mesa and this mesa, and he hunts that area every year. And he said that he's been in there and seen sign of them, as well as found a large egg clutch where the eggs had broken open. And he said he thought initially they thought they were ostrich eggs, because some ranchers and some landowners do have animals like that. It's probably not likely that out in these mesa lands there's going to be an ostrich survive very long. But yeah, so they found eggs that size, and that's considerable, when you're going to look at an egg and go, my gosh, it's an ostrich size egg. There's nothing else out there, period, that lays eggs like that. And them being on one of the mesas that they're reported to fly between this range. And then one of the last comments he made was, yeah, it's not mountain lions getting our livestock. It's those damn big birds, so they don't care about them. They don't see them as anomalous. They see them as an issue, and they'd shoot them if they could. So.
That's interesting. You hear a lot of the stories of, the natives or, in other cultures around the world, like Africa and stuff, that, we go looking for Mokelia Membe and stuff. Mm-hmm. And to us, it's this, huge dinosaur, mysterious creature. And to them, it's just this annoying thing that blocks the river, and that's kind of like what you're talking about with these. It's really interesting, the area and location of the stuff and the local lore and that around it. So.
Well, to me, it adds an awful lot of validity when someone doesn't even think it's neat. They don't talk about it to anybody. They don't even really tell each other because, cowboys, they're kind of embarrassed to bring anything like that up. Mm-hmm. And, these are hardcore men. You're not supposed to see anything from, 200 million years or 65 million years or whatever it is. You're not supposed to see any creatures from back then. And so they just don't tell anybody. And then With me, they know I'm not going to go run my mouth, so the floodgates kind of open. So it was interesting to see how many people came back to me and said, hey, man, we've seen those. 5 years ago, we saw them over, in this location. They were real high altitude, 2 of them. And, but you just start hearing all these reports, come in once you've actually, word out to say something. So if these guys popped up word of mouth, then it's a good indicator that they're probably 1 in 200, the amount of people that have seen them in the last so many years. I mean, that would be about right for who would talk about them in this area. And but yeah, their opinion on them, they're just a pain in the ass. We don't like them. We're not telling anybody. We just want to get rid of them. Yeah, that to me offers a lot of validity. And plus, these guys live on the land. There's not an animal out there, whether it be transient or permanent, that they don't know about, and that they don't know about intimately. What they do, where they go, what time they land, the whole 9 yards. They could tell you that about anything, sandhill cranes or the blue herons. And people say, oh, well, maybe they saw a crane. Well, they know what a crane is. There's no question when they see a crane. They know what a blue heron is. And those are the only animals that would have, a body type that you could mistake for something like this. Of course, they don't have, long, slender tails with a club on the end or anything like that. But and they're also not chocolate brown. So that's what the one we saw was dark colored like that. It could have been a dark gray because we had overcast sky and clouds behind him. So we had just a dark view of him, but he was completely even dark. There was no other color patterns, no modeling, no lighter color. It was just all a dark color. And our original witness stated that they saw it during the daylight, and they said that it was like a dark brown, like chocolate brown or dark coffee brown. So just all homogeneous color. So we envision them with a light belly and all these things like this, like birds, and but that's not what we saw. So
very cool, very interesting. Do you have plans to continue researching them, or do you go out and look for them or anything? Or
we do absolutely have plans to go do some research on them. We're probably going to wait till next spring. Once it starts to warm up a little more, because that's when the reports start coming in. We're not sure what they would do in the winter, where they would hibernate, or we believe they'd actually hibernate. We don't believe they'd leave. So we don't think that they're migrating, because we have all the reports in the same areas every year, and the area's not that big. So, but yeah, we definitely intend on going back out. We're going to go get more interview and go talk to this rancher hunter, and as well a landowner who he told us he could tell us all about them, because he sees them weekly, out of his place. So yeah, we're definitely going to do a follow-up on that stuff. Absolutely.
Awesome. Do you guys put that out on your YouTube then as well, or?
We haven't done any, there's been no production whatsoever on any of this yet.
Okay.
We're basically saving it till we get a little more interviews and stuff done. I did throw up, I think on Facebook, I threw up a quick video of us going out to the original sighting location and looking at the spot, looking at the bridge, and just recounting the deal. But we haven't produced anything like our own investigation on it yet.
Okay. What is your YouTube for people listening?
It's called KX Kryder Exploration. So that's it. You can find it searching just Kryder Exploration, but the actual channel name starts with KX and then Kryder Exploration. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Awesome. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Bigfoot here. So you've been out. You said you went to Colorado and did some exploring. Where else have you gone out Bigfooting?
Pretty well all over the western United States. So we've been from Washington State. That's Topaz, by the way. They make appearances during my live streams a lot.
Awesome.
But Washington State, Oregon, been around up in there. Colorado, Utah. Let's see, did a little bit of work in Texas, Arizona, the Mogollon Rim and stuff. I used to run all over that country. So mostly just the southwestern states so far. And then, of course, we've done Michigan by invitation up there, which is, to me, that's really great, having this huge geographic difference, because I get to see the commonalities. What are they doing down here that they're doing up there? And it was pretty amazing, because basically, although the foliage and the terrain was different, applying the same methodology to foliage basically had the same results. So we were able to get right on them and track them and stuff up there too, because they were doing the same type of foliage manipulation and things we could track. So
very cool. You mean like the kind of like the stick structures and that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah, more like individual twig snaps, breaks, and what they do as they mark trail and where they're going, and then where they're going to occupy for any length of time. So they do specific types of breaks and markings based on that. So it's hey, I'm gone here, you can follow me through here, or hey, the group's in here and things. So they'll actually make different types of manipulations for those meetings. So I guess so that other subjects can probably relocate the group quickly and quietly without having to holler out to them, things like this. They can basically track each other around. So.
Very cool. So what have you discovered about that? Like, what do certain things symbolize, do you think?
Well, one is the large female in the group that we studied intimately. She marks a lot of her just constant daily travel by snapping the ends of branches and things. And what she'll do is she'll actually snap a twig, and she'll leave the twig hanging by a little strip of bark and just a little section. So snap the end off and then snap the next section after that end's gone and leave it hanging, like 4 to 6 inches of that just kind of dangling there. And they don't stay for long. Those actually fall off pretty fast. So that she'll do that just on her routes of travel as she goes through the brush. So we know that that's a fresh, ongoing motion of travel and following her. And then they'll twist off like cedar or other very, very fibrous woods that won't break. They'll twist up real good and things. They'll take young cedars like that on the edge of tree groves, especially dissimilar trees, like deciduous trees and things. And then they'll twist the top of a small cedar to the point sometimes it comes off, sometimes it doesn't, but it's absolutely destroyed. And then a lot of times they'll rub on those specific types. So only those, though. We call them signposts. And they'll generate a couple of those around an area they're going to occupy for a length of time. So when they move the group in, they'll do that. They'll transient to a location on a river system or somewhere that's shaded, shielded water and a good food source that they can sustain on. So, and that what they'll do is they'll go into these areas for a week or two, and then they'll kind of just mull around the same area for a week or two back and forth, and then they'll move the whole group. And it might move a mile, it might move 5 miles or whatever to fresh resource and not shy game at that point. And then they'll go ahead and occupy there. So each time they do that, they'll mark their main route of travel in and out. So their travel corridor they'll mark, and they'll do that with leaning trees laid on the ground, and breaks, just top breaks, and basically breakdowns, 8 to 10 foot, even as low as 4 foot. And they'll mark those. And then, like I said, when they're going to occupy an area, a quarter mile, half mile for a week or whatever, they'll usually make one of those signposts, or they'll use the same one over and over again, and they'll keep twisting new sections on the same little tree until they've wasted it. And then they'll do another one near to that. But each time they move in, they'll come in and do something on that. So basically you can tell how long they've been there at each location, and because you can see how fresh those breaks are. And then when we so there's those different types are what they commonly leave. And then that tells us where they have been, where they're traveling, and then where they're occupying at the time. And then they'll do daily, if they're in a little area daily, they'll snap at the entry and exit points of wherever their forage is. They'll actually make just the straight down snaps. And they'll always do that as well on stuff that's very tough, like Russian olive is one that's extremely hard, very difficult to break. When you do it, just splinters like crazy. And but they're able to do it in tight little snaps because of their finger pressure. And it's easy to see when they've done it and something else hasn't. And almost nothing busts a green Russian olive anyway. It just doesn't break. It'll bend over and fracture in the fibers. They'll split and fracture, but the branch just doesn't normally snap. And so they use those as windows. So they use which foliage is dissimilar and easy to identify it as well. Will hold the kind of sign that they're looking to do. So.
Very interesting. Now, the last one that you're talking about, is that the little ones that hang, or is that the full ones that are like a kind of
usually
triangle kind of shape?
Yeah, those right there. So it'll be too is new growth. So they'll take the new growth that's 4 or 5 foot long little stems. They're still got a fresh virgin bark on them, and they'll always use those too. So, and what you'll see is you'll see a tree that's been used 7 years, 10 years, or the same one, and they each time they've gone back through and used it as a corridor, they'll snap those down. And then of course we also see structures and leaning poles and things like that, and those meanings are a little tougher to discern because we don't have an instant type of a return on our investment, so to speak. So they're things that'll sit there long beyond any tracks or other sign or things go by. They're most of those are more of a permanent or long-term marking, of corridors, territory, things like that.
That's interesting. Now, so you have spent a lot of time researching like a specific group down where you've been researching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Have you noticed like that they stay in a certain area, or like how big of an area do they occupy for, like, not to say like migration, but where they're following the food source and stuff like that?
So as a family unit, it looks like if they've got a secure location that has constant food resource, they just won't leave it. They'll use it up. They'll use it to their full advantage if they don't have to leave, because you can think that traveling becomes a danger. Anytime you're up out of the thick zone, you're exposed, you're dangerous. I don't believe they feel secure unless they're in these very familiar, very dense, very tight areas as a family group. Now, we talk differently about other subjects. Once they get a certain age, they move a lot. They cruise around an awful lot. But the main family unit really doesn't. We see that they'll take up, if you were to lay it out, it'd probably be about a 50 to 100 square mile area over the year. And they'll range back and forth in that. But a lot of times what we'll see is they'll stay within the same 5-mile section of a riverbed. And your riverbed may not be 1,000 to 2,000 feet wide. It's zone of foliage and things like that in the bottoms. And they'll just occupy 1 mile to 5 miles of that if it can keep up to them and their presence. Of course, even a family unit, we figure there's 7 in this group because that's how many we can individually track through scat and feet print, things like that. And it takes them about 5 to 7 days to pretty well clear out about a 1/4 mile to 1/2 mile of riverbed, let's say, before they move on again. And so it's usually a week or two in any one location. And so the range isn't all that great. Now when you get into the older subjects, once their foot hits 15, 16 inches, they're out and about quite a bit. When the foot gets 17 or a little more, they don't come home near as often. And then like the big male, he very rarely comes into the family group. He's pretty well always gone. And the only ranges he can occupy comfortably without being seen and things like that are 40 to 60 miles away. And we figure that's one night's travel, basically. They can do 40 to 60 miles in a night. And so you've got, the males and the older adolescents, be it males or females or whatever, their range can be quite big. I mean, you're looking at probably 1,000 square miles by the time that's only 10 by 100. And so you can imagine as he's traveling back and forth, his corridors and different routes of travel and things, he's going to occupy probably close to 1,000 square miles. So.
Now, have you noticed anything different between, like you were talking about the female marking with the breaks? Do the males do a similar, or have you noticed anything like that?
I haven't seen the big male doing that at all. So matter of fact, it took 6 years before we even found physical sign. I found breaks where he crossed a frozen river or a frozen creek, and the ice was like 4 inches thick, which is way supportive enough, and he smashed through it with each step. And step gaps between 8 foot, and then the last one leaving the bank was about 12 foot. So he put that last plant, kind of turned at an angle and leaped out, and he cleared 12 feet. And the ground at that time was absolutely frozen. Even the sand was frozen solid. So even soft sand wouldn't move. And he didn't leave a mark after he busted through all that ice. So we never have ever seen where he's broken a stick, or pretty well he just absolutely tries not to leave any sign at all. He's super, even though he's huge, he's super, super tough to follow through and track. He's really, really good. Toes and fingers a lot of the times, and you don't even recognize those as tracks, usually. But we see just now in the last time we went into the area, we call it's GLST is our designation for it, so people can keep up with it, and us as well. And last time we were in, I noticed that a younger male that we call George, just for namesake, he was marking like his mother was locally within the group, and he had never done that before. So we found his hair tangled in with hers on a signpost or on a rubbing post. And I thought that was really cool because we've only ever seen hers. And so it almost seems like maybe he's maturing a little more, taking on some of that responsibility for marking with the family unit. Now, we don't expect he'll stay with the family group once he grows older. His foot's still around 14, 15 inch, something like that right now. And he's been growing over the years. We watched him growing over the years since 2011, I think. And so, but he's still not an older subject. He's still just a kid, basically. And but what we do, it's interesting to see him start to rub on mom's rubbing posts. Now, we can only assume that when he matures, goes out on his own, he's not going to be doing that because he's not going to be trying to lure his or let his father know, hey, this is where we are, or a big brother or whoever. He'll be doing his own thing. But he'll fully understand how all that rubbing and marking works because he's there with mom doing it. You see what I'm saying? So you see how you actually seeing how the information's being taught down through the generations too. So
interesting. Now, how big do you think, based on the footprints and stuff like that, how big do you think that the big male is?
Well, I saw him at 40 foot, and I videotaped him at 40 foot, and from everything we could see with scaling, he was over 11 foot, so he's around 12 with 23-inch feet. His fists are 10 and a half inches wide, and his knuckles, or the knuckle prints, 10 and a half inches across, basically. The open stretch hand's quite a bit bigger than that, 16 inches long, a little longer, maybe 17 inches long, and about 15 to 16 inches in spread, across like the tip, like this, from the tip of my pinky to the tip of my thumb, would be about the same length as or a little narrower than the length of his hand. And then across the palm section, just the palm intersection in here was about 9 inches. And then when he makes his fist, it's 10 inches across, 10 and a half inches across. Wow. And his foot was 23 inches by 11 and a half across the front of the foot and 6 inches across the heel.
Wow. That's huge. There's a turtle man down in Tennessee has 24-inch footprints. And we went down and did an investigation with him and got to see the cast that he got. And they're just unreal to think that, when you're out looking for these prints and, trying to find evidence in the area and these things are that big, I think a lot of people might overlook them just for scale because you're not used to seeing something. You're looking for a footprint in, our very limited understanding of feet and anatomy and stuff, that you're looking for something similar to your own. And when you get these huge footprints, something left it. He's got these casts, and to think that 24 inches, for a footprint is just enormous. And you said you got the 23 inches as well.
Yeah, and so far we've seen 22 in one location and 23 in another. I haven't seen anything personally larger than that, but like I said, that's the biggest. But you're right. I'm a tracker, and I claim to be pretty good at it. And but even the day we initially found his first set of prints, I didn't see him, and I was standing maybe 4 feet from him, and my buddy was about 30 feet away. And we look for what's called shine. So if you walk across a green lawn and then put the sun opposite your direction from that print, you'll see what's the flattened spot of the grass. It'll look shinier or lighter. You can notice that everywhere. Believe it or not, in some conditions, you can even see it like across a gravel parking lot, and you'll see this shine. So. But he noticed that shine shape from about 30, 40 feet away at an angle. And so, and I didn't. He said, "Is that a track?" And I looked down and I didn't even snap. And because what you're dealing with is something so large that you're looking within right, like you said, you're looking within for a track structure in a shape this big. And so your brain does not put this part with this part. So unless it's an absolute like perfect print in the mud or something like that on any other kind of terrain, you just erase it almost. The 2 big toes, I saw them, but they almost, to my brain, they looked like a cow print with a split hoof that size. But then the other toes are there too, and the sweep and the heel and the compression. It's like, oh no. So I had to back up, look at those, and then we tracked them out a little. Like I said, 6 years before we even spotted the first one. So, because when he's moving, he's leaving marks that your brain is not even going to comprehend as a print at all. He's using fingertips, knuckles, and the tips of his feet, usually just the ball and the toes, because he's usually quad running around. The only time we've seen his prints in long form standing up was on Google Earth. And then we're able to go out and find a couple impressions. But you can see them on Google Earth, no problem.
Wow.
Because they're 2 foot across or just about, with a 5 to 7 foot gap. And so even from the sky, you're looking thousands of cow prints. And then here's this inline bipedal marks down the riverbed, so considerable sign he'll leave when he's not. And that was when we looked actually at part of his travel corridor from probably 7 to 10 miles from where the main group is. And he was just cruising through riverbed. Now, he didn't seem to be near as careful at that location as he is where the group is, because there's more human presence in that area. So there are people who, go for walks every once in a while. So if it's real dense, and most people don't because there's no trails, but some people do. And they'll ride horses down that riverbed and things like that. So there's human presence that, so I noticed there is a difference. When he doesn't think there's anybody in that area, he'll stand up, walk, and leave tracks. But when anywhere he's at, I believe that he thinks that he may get spotted or his tracks side. Yeah, he's really good at hiding.
Wow. That's another thing, looking for like the knuckle prints and stuff that like a lot of people don't realize that they do travel more quadrupedally along these areas, and you're always looking for these big prints and stuff. But we have to take a quick break here for station identification. We're talking with Robert Kryder from Kryder Exploration, and we'll be right back.
Certified psychic medium Stephanie Lynn creates an authentic connection between the living and the spirit world. Stephanie knows she is here to help heal, educate, and provide validation that there is more after death, and allows herself to be a conduit and work as a team with spirit to pass on messages from their world to ours. Stephanie Lynn also works as a spiritual life coach to help you achieve, create, and manifest your best self and life. Looking for help communicating with an animal? Searching for a past life regression therapist? Or dealing with a paranormal experience? Stephanie Lynn is here to help. For a list of full services, visit her on Facebook under Stephanie Lynn Spirit Sensitive. That's Stephanie Lynn Spirit Sensitive.
All right, we're back here on Monday Morning Monsters with my guest, Robert Kryder. And we've been talking about some Bigfoot and flying pterosaur creatures. And I want to remind everybody that's out there listening, if you have any comments or questions throughout the show, feel free to leave them on your chosen platform, and we'll get them on air and try and get those answered as well. So besides doing all of this Bigfooting and cryptozoology and stuff, you also do a lot of we'll say like treasure hunting and kind of stuff as well. I know that's kind of what you started with, right?
Yeah, that's the mainstay. I usually tell people that the whole Bigfoot thing is about 2% of what we do. So we study enigmatic lost cultures and things like that, and what they left behind, what they built, what they stashed. I learned how to decode monuments and coded symbols through working like the late 80s on up. And then I got very prolific at doing that. So I was utilized by a lot of private groups to break coded locations to get to entry points, dig points, and then as well to excavate, make those entries, enter ancient mines, disassemble death traps, things like that. It's kind of like what you see on Oak Island, but kind of more for real. I mean, they do it, but it's a little, the real aspect of it's a little different than we see on the TV show. But yeah, that's kind of how I started and what we mainstay do.
That's awesome. Yeah, like I said, I've been listening to a lot of your other interviews and stuff, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about this kind of stuff as well on here, even though we're cryptozoology and that. But I had a lady come up to me. We were just at CryptidCon last weekend, not this weekend, but and she had a pretty interesting story and theory. And she, I told her about you to get in touch with you. So I don't know if she ever did, but she was talking a lot about the Bridgewater Triangle area. Are you familiar at all with that?
No, not offhand. I've
Okay.
seems like I've heard the name before, but like I said, I don't do a lot of follow up and research in other people's work only because we're so busy doing our own. So
Yeah. So it's up in like Massachusetts and that kind of New England area and that, and she's grew up there and had these. She did all this research on the stuff that was going on over there and that, and these. I'm trying to remember exactly what all she was talking about, but there was people that had buried not Aztec gold or something up in there, and that's what she believes was used to fund the Revolutionary War from England, and that they had gone in there and they had got this treasure that had actually she was talking about the land bridge from Europe over to the United States, and that they had brought all this gold over here, or actually I'm sorry, silver. They had brought all this silver over here and buried it up in New England there, and that's what they had used to fund this. And that the Bridgewater Triangle with all these disappearances and stuff was not because of paranormal, but actually these people protecting the treasure.
yeah, that's really common. So we've been lucky enough over the years to have rediscovered some absolutely major enigmatic lost locations, and a lot of people actually spent their lives trying to find these places, and get kind of butthurt when we come out with them because that's the end of their life quest, and so they don't want to consider them or believe them that often. But what we normally find is from about 800 BC on to about 55 BC, this area was being mined and utilized for resources, and those were being hauled back to the old world by the Celtic, what you'd call shipping fleet. So that which Rome, the Caesar in Rome, burned them in 55 BC, and their ships were over 240 foot just to the deck. So the boats are over 1,000 foot long. These are huge worldwide shipping fleet that not many people talk about, but you can find reference to them in writings of Caesar, because when he bragged about burning their fleet, basically. But they were active, like I said, from about 800 BC all the way to 55 BC. So they mined, cached tremendous amounts of wealth all over the country. So it's more likely that wealth was being taken from here than was brought here. We have the richest silver mines in the world are here, the richest gold mines are here, all these things. So a lot of these other countries don't have real sources or very good sources for gold and silver and things like that. Even like South America, there's gold down there, but there's no massive sources that could have produced enough for the Montezuma Empire, let's say, for each generation there had more gold than is even known in South America. Most of those locations were up here in North America already. You can note that when Columbus and them came over, those three boats, well, the first boat went back with smelted gold aboard. And anyone that knows anything about mining and ore processing and things like that knows that it would take a lifetime of a group of men to have discovered, mined, smelted, and hauled a shipload of gold. So it had to already be done. That material had to already be smelted and put somewhere before they got it. And that's why Spain came here. It wasn't for colonization. It was to acquire gold. Like they say that a man's heart yearns for God, a conquistador's yearns for gold. So that was the mainstay of everything they did. Now, when we talk about like funding the Revolutionary War and things like that, that's very, very possible. What we actually find is most of that is from Europe, be it Austria or Germany, in areas like Belgium, areas like that were actually paying for the industrialization and colonization of the planet at that time. And so there was a global situation going on, and many different parties with many different interests working together and working against each other all together to utilize resources in North America to set themselves up in Europe. And so a lot of what we see as far as the Revolutionary War and things like this, we're actually trying to cut that tie, to cut Europe's ties in using the wealth from the Americas to facilitate themselves and power over there. So the battle was over a lot of that. Yeah, that's like the movie National Treasure. That actually comes from a lot of real information, which is why one of the guys' names is Rob in there and the other guy's name is Ben. That goes back to my history, because Bob Fitzgerald is the guy who did the consultation work for that, and we've been involved vicariously with him and his technology for almost 30 years. And so when it came time to do the movie, a lot of what they put together for the movie is real, and the players are real, and we've been involved in discovering some of those things. So there certainly is a history that no one knows about, as well as caches of wealth that no one realizes is here as well. And that's kind of what we wanted to pop off, the historical part of it, because, and like I've been in the past, anytime the wealth comes into play, boy, the guns just come out and bullets go blazing. I mean, people lose control of their own minds as soon as value goes very high. So
interesting, yeah. So that's really cool. Like that. So you were involved kind of with the National Treasure movies then?
Well, what they do is they construct these things with consultants, and these consultants relay stories and information, and then they write a movie or a script out of that. And so not directly, no, but vicariously, because a lot of our work was referenced, and then right down to names being referenced, which was interesting.
That's so cool. Yeah, I don't know. I love history and stuff as well. Like there's so much that you can learn, that they don't teach you in school, and then that they just erase, like, oh, well, we don't want to talk about that, or, and it's so,
Well, it all ties together. That's why, they don't want to let you pull on any individual string, because you'll just take apart the whole tapestry. It'll all come down and fall. So they were very protective about certain forms and certain types of information, like, and who's delivering that information. The interpretation of it's most important. So, if you get someone that interprets it within the realm that they, let's say, approve of, well, they're all over the place. They'll get pumped. The moment you have an interpretation that doesn't fit the tale of they, then that's going to get blocked and every effort. And it's great. Now, what we see is, the reason we do Bigfoot and things like that, and cryptozoology, and even the alien stuff and everything, along with the study into ancient cultures and all, is they're connected. The ancient culture tells you all about every one of those things. They mention all of them, and there's no way to separate the two. So if you're going to look culturally at people who are going to rough and remote areas and concealing things and secrets and this and that, it all ties together. And then when we look back, even in tales or lore, mythology, and what I call history, thousands and thousands of years, these things were as well connected. And we see the physicality of that today through trace evidence like maps and things like that, where they were created by these people, or sculptures that include everything from what we look at as a small gray, a Bigfoot, and people. And they'll all be in the same panel. They'll all be in the same structural making or construction of monuments and things like that, where they'll all be there. And it's repeated over and over and over. And then we can see historical, or what we'd say myths, legends, things from all over the world that serve to validate this, because they tell of these things being connected. And then here we go. We can see it from central Mexico up through the Southwest USA that have all the identical same traits and things. And these are right down to UFO craft and their occupants, and all this is not just featured on tablets and stuff in Mexico that some people call fake. We find the exact same things featured on rock panels in extremely remote areas that no one even knows about the rock panels. And here's the same things identical being featured on those plates in Mexico that show aliens. So, and then there's, in the same glyph, there's a Bigfoot overlooking the scene or whatever. So there's just no way to separate them in our mind.
This goes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning too. The natives and the ancient cultures and stuff, they didn't make stuff up. They didn't have internet. They didn't have, all these, books or long distance communication. What they saw, they depicted, So we're talking about, the best witnesses and stuff. These guys are putting down what happened and what they saw. And when you have these cultures all over the world, all over the continent and stuff, all depicting the same thing, that leads a lot of questions there. And you know.
Yeah, and you had people's value keeps that stuff integral, because what we do is we tend to value the story and the character and the involvement, and that's where we put our with them it was is the rendition exactly the same. That's where the value is, and who can tell the story exactly, not who can embellish it and put themselves in it. And so they didn't see that as glorification like we do, and a lot of those cultures really had no concept of telling a story. They just didn't have that concept. So everything that they were told, they believed. It's naive, right? But in a culture that's truly advanced, it has a form of innocence. Its naivety is its innocence in not participating in things like construction or lies or fabrication of stories. And that's how they were. So when they tell you something, generally, that's how it was, because they didn't have the concept. What's the use in telling something that didn't happen, right, to them? Because delivering it through oral means, and they had written means as well, whether or not archaeology likes to admit it, just because they don't find them. And then sometimes they have been found and they still don't admit it. But so there was a written and oral both. But the point being is that the details remain the same. And the person who would be shunned wouldn't be the one who doesn't have the glorious life. It's the person who puts themselves in it or tells the story differently. And so in that, we trust a great deal. That's why we usually don't call most of it legend or lore. We respect a culture's history as their history. Anybody could say, oh, well, the Revolutionary War and the forefathers of our country, well, it's lore and it's myth. Yeah, it was wrote, but they embellished it. They didn't really feel that way. You could tear apart anybody's history like that. Who is so arrogant enough to go in there and say, no, your history doesn't agree with what we think it should be, not with what evidence we have, but what we think it should be. So it's just a myth. That's pretty disrespectful to every culture we're regarding when we do that. So,
well, there's the old adage, history is written by the winners.
Absolutely.
And you see a lot of that, in different, look at the world wars and stuff. I'm sure the Americas and the winners see things different than, the Allied powers, the Nazis and all that stuff. They're two different winners and losers in that story, depending on who's telling it, and that's the same as, back in the day. So I recently got to go out to Utah and see some of the petroglyphs and stuff out there. And I was wondering, I learned a little bit about like these glyphs that depicted these ant people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about those guys?
Well, and here's kind of what we do too. So when we say glyphs depicting ant people, we know of lore and stories of the ant people from the Hopi. But most of what you're going to see in Utah is Ute and Navajo, and those are not the same history. So, but white folk maybe just meld it all together. Hey, an Indian said something. They don't realize that all the different natives had all their different histories because they're different remembrances from their point of view and what they participated in. And so, and also a lot of times we see glyphs, we say, oh, that's a glyph of the ant people. We're not asking a Navajo or Ute what that is. We just see horns on the head and things like this. But actually, early Europeans wore helmets with horns on them. And so and so did other cultures. So that could have been them. We know the tales of the Nephilim and the Anunnaki, and like I said, the Nephilim offspring, who were overlords all over the globe, not just over there. They ruled the planet on a global system, and they also ruled here. And a lot of what we're seeing, we call ant people or Kachina and things like this. We're looking at those and we're placing titles we're familiar with on those glyphs. Most of what I see are from the Great Migration and the Hopi remnant from the Great Migration as they traveled all four directions. And then we see also things like from the Ute, the Navajo, and others like that throughout the Southwest that tell of these ancient lores, but many of them were created by pre-existing societies. So they as well have to adjust their legend, their myth, their lore and history to these marks and glyphs that were put by people that predated them. And so when you ask me, like what do I think of those? I really don't put, what would you say? I really don't put a conclusion on those. With what we understand as ant people, they weren't humans. They didn't have horns. and things like that. But often, especially in the Utah crowd, I love everybody, but in the Utah crowd, it seems like every time they find one of these heroes, what Hopi would call Kachina, or the helpers from the stars, or the Nephilim overlords, in certain regions, they're just regarded as different things. And I know in that area, they're called the ant people. But really, they're generalizing. And to us, that tears it up. That takes away from, if you want to go find something in the field, you cannot do that. You can't say, oh, well, look here, they're talking about unless you have someone from that culture who's traditional, who's going to tell you what that is. And hardly anybody's doing that. So, but yeah, I think a lot of those characters that we call ant people, especially in Utah and stuff, where you have the large triangular torso, and you'll have the big helmeted head with the two inturned horns, and you'll have, those are probably the Nephilim overlords. Those are the giants that were ruling everybody. That's what we've seen, because we see where those guys are being burnt at the stake eventually. And that's what they did with their giants. They got rid of them. And we still see celebration of that in the modern Zozobra celebrations, where they put up a giant ghost white guy. He's really huge. And then they all gather around him and they burn him. And what they're doing is burning their woes for the year. So what you're supposed to do is write your biggest problems on a piece of paper and you throw it into that fire. Well, what that's telling us is, in language, is here's our biggest woe. This was our main problem. And we liberated humanity when we burned these guys at the stake. And so to liberate yourself from problems each year, that same ceremony was held up, and it's still being done. And we see rock art depicting that, whether it be cut in or painted on, all over the world, being Australia, Africa, China, everywhere, shows them gathering around and burning a giant, or gathering around a tied up giant, or whatever. And so that's what I believe we're seeing, though, when we see those particular characters.
Well, thank you. Do you spoke a little bit there about the Nephilim and stuff. Do you believe that the Nephilim, like some do, are Bigfoot, or do you think that those are two completely different things?
No, totally different. So there's no reason to have ever put those two together, because there was all types of beings, all kinds of things. There wasn't like just Nephilim giants. Sorry, there was 4 types of giants listed in biblical texts outside the Nephilim that weren't the Nephilim. The Nephilim were giant and huge of stature, and were what they called men of renown. And they were some described as heroes, some as omnipresent rulers and things like this. But they were never ever spoken of to be, for one, natural of any kind whatsoever. Nature, they were against nature. They were here to conquer nature and rule mankind, not to exist within nature's rules whatsoever. Technology, hyper regulation, things like that was what their traits were. The exact opposite from what we see in a Bigfoot species. They're the one animal that wants nothing to do with human stuff. Why would they keep records of how many acorns they ate yesterday? But the Anunnaki and down through the Nephilim were like this, hyper organized, hyper political. And so they were rulers, and they're the ones who brought law to mankind, to regulate mankind. And we're looking at the most non-regulated biped on the planet and saying, oh, well, that's who brought laws to man. We never should have blended those two together. And it's a dim view by someone who hasn't studied enough world cultures to understand that everybody had their giants. They were not all the same. And then we back look in the fossil record, we look at, well, where were the giants? There was no giants. Yeah, there was. Denisovan was 10 foot tall. Homo heidelbergensis, 8.5 to 9 foot tall. These are giants. You stand up to next to a 10-foot guy. Sorry, man, you can't believe how really actually big that is. Mm-hmm. These are giants, and they're known and in our fossil record, and they were human. So here's giant humans from not that long ago in the past. So why would we go and take a Bigfoot and go, oh, let's squeeze it to the Nephilim, this abomination hybrid thing that came about, that couldn't reproduce on their own? They had to reproduce with human women to be able to do that. They couldn't have a Nephilim woman and a Nephilim man couldn't produce an offspring because they're hybrids. So when we see that kind of thing, it's like, all right, I don't know why, other than to say we reach for answers, to form conclusions, so we have a way to discuss them. And it's not people going, oh, I don't know. Most people aren't good with saying I don't And fact is, we don't really know, right? But we know just by all the historical traits and everything we've ever learned about either the Bigfoot species or the Nephilim, and there's no commonality between the two. There's no commonality. Never was there a hair-covered Nephilim. They were considered more beautiful humanly than humans. Their skin, their features, everything was more perfect and cleaner than we are. Not more rogue and more ancient looking cavemanish and things like that. No, they were more refined than we are yet. So it's just interesting to see that play was ever made. And I don't mean to put down anyone who ever went there. I think that they should have taken a broader view and probably a more realistic view into like the Sumerian text and things like that, who actually talk about the Nephilim, not authors who've discussed their interpretations of the Nephilim over time. So when we get people rereading authored material that has interpretation and opinion, then that somehow that opinion and interpretation becomes a fact with the history, and it's not. The only historical record are the historical records from the Sumerians, Babylonians, and then other cultures that as well had those rulers over them, but not any person that came since them. So that's not history. That's not what we're looking at. We just really need to take the details down and just look for them what they are without wanting them to be anything else, right? Just let it dictate its own reality. That's where my opinion bases. So.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% there. I always get asked, at conventions and stuff, if I believe that Bigfoot are Nephilim, and I'm like, no, they're completely different things, In fact, there's, I don't know, you seem to kind of be up on like the biblical stuff and that, Esau?
Yeah.
The guy that was covered from head to foot in hair.
Yeah, wouldn't live in a house, brought deer to the family all the time. Nobody could get deer better than him. He was like, deer was like no big deal. He was like the best hunter ever imaginable and wouldn't come in the house. Right. Mm-hmm. And tall, huge, covered in red hair or chestnut hair. Give me a break, man. Right.
Now, see, to me, if you're going to put Bigfoot in the Bible, that's where he comes from.
Absolutely. I agree, because it's actually stated that he's human. Mm-hmm. He's the son of somebody. So you're looking at they're letting you know in that this is a man. It's a human that doesn't have what you and I have. They're not like you and I are. They're the same, but different. And it was also said that he was not around to receive the blessing of God or the grace of God. And that's another thing that's talked about too. So, but I think what that does is it's relaying to us that they're not part of the politicized religion, that they never did that part. They stayed natural. They are different than us in that regard. We are different than them in that regard. And with the Nephilim, again, I hate to go back and rehash that, but again, that makes that statement, because look at what people do. Look at what differentiates Esau from humans in the Bible, differentiates what is a good explanation for the differences between Bigfoot and modern humans. Esau didn't care about what Bigfoots don't care about. And even people back then did. They cared about their reputation. They cared about their name. They cared about their status. They cared about all these things. Their idiosyncrasies, titles, and things like that are just superfluous to real survival. Humans just love all that stuff. It's a big deal to them. Just not to Bigfoot. And it wasn't to Esau. And, so that's, I go right there with you. I've come to that same conclusion there. That was the way for the Bible to explain, here's another brother of yours out there, but he's not like you, and he doesn't care about what you care about. He is good at what he is, and this is his place in the world. And I think we could leave it there. I don't think we have a reason to go and start addressing it and attaching to all these other things. So
definitely. And even in there, they talk about how he was like banished up to the mountains. You always hear the stories of the ridge walkers, and the Bigfoot, the native stories and that. And here's this creature that, when Moses brings back the people and stuff, and they can take whatever land they want, or go wherever, but you can't go up to the mountains and take this land from these guys, because they're my children too. And I always like tell people that when they bring up the Nephilim, I'm like, well, I don't think he's Nephilim at all. This is what I think he's in there, but you're looking at the wrong side of the book here to find that. And
it could still be a hybrid and the whole 9 yards, but it doesn't have to come from an alien source. And there's a good reason we don't have Nephilim walking around, and there's a dang good reason that they basically went away. When we look at the earth being ruled by the giants, they got less and less and less and less till there was only a survivor here and a survivor there. And that's globally. We know about Utah as well. We know about, the cave there that had the giants and things in it. And where they chased I believe the Utes chased the red-haired giants into the cave and slaughtered them in there. Well, they were the last ones. Why were they the last ones? So either there was disease, some form of plague or starvation or catastrophe or something, but populations don't decrease without something decreasing them. Well, you're looking at a race, though, that has a genetic system based on hybridization. It's like mules. If people go away tomorrow, mules go away tomorrow. There won't be another mule, period, because a mule is a donkey and a horse. And a mule cannot breed with another mule and get a mule. The only way to get a mule is to breed a donkey and a horse. And this is what we see happening with them as well, is they literally could not reproduce themselves to the point to where their lineage was going to carry on. Genetically, it dusted itself out. We probably still carry remnant gene we still carry Neanderthalis. We have some Denisovan. We have these things in us right now, like the people in Tibet at the high altitude. They believe that those people, or they know they have Denisovan DNA, and those genes are what allow them to live and operate and work at those extreme high altitudes. And we know that. And people that don't have an active Denisovan gene can't do that. So we already see that we are carrying the genes from all these creatures in us. But do we have them popping out now? They're 10-foot people on a regular basis now. The genes are in there for it, but it's not predominant anymore. And that seems to be what happened with the Nephilim as well. The genes were not predominant. They couldn't locally breed within their own population, and they eventually snuffed. Where look at Bigfoot. Bigfoot breed. They reproduce. Two Bigfoots make a Bigfoot. So this isn't necessarily, even if the genes show that there's conjunction, and you could call us hybrids, we're kind of not. So you could say we're a hybrid between Neanderthalis, Denisovan, and Cro-Magnon. But we're not, because we're all humans, and we all can breed and reproduce, which means we're all basically creating subspecies, not necessarily true hybrids. And so I think there's the difference that a lot of people need to probably just factor in.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time so much. I have another question again, if you're willing to continue a little bit here.
Yeah, let's go.
So when you brought up the red-haired giants, and I have like a lot of information and stuff on that as well. And you hear like the native tribes and stuff going to war with them, and that when they talk about the red-haired giants, though, there's a lot of things that you hear like of like the 6 fingers and the double rows of teeth. Mm-hmm. And you have these similarities between Bigfoot and the red-haired giants, but whenever you hear talking about Bigfoots, you're talking about the knuckle prints and the hand prints and that, they always have 5 fingers. Mm-hmm. And I've never heard anybody in my experience talk about, seeing a Bigfoot, scream at him or something and noticing a double row of teeth. So right. Do you have any kind of like consideration between like, do you think the red-haired giants were Bigfoot, or did they, evolve into Bigfoot, or is there any connection there, do you think?
No, I think that they're two totally separate beings. So, and even in Bigfoot, clinically, they don't generally have what we would call red hair. Right. But we notice like in the Paracas skulls and a lot of these remnant things, that red hair was prolific amongst those groups. And most of the time with giants, they were said to have red hair, whether it be in Turkey or Afghanistan, or wherever, they're often spoke about that way. I think that that's what that is. Whether that was the Nephilim giants or not, which there was, like I said, there was really several large types of humans over time, very large. But I don't think what was found in Lovelock Cave is anything like a Bigfoot whatsoever. For one, they talk about that they wore sandals and they things like that. So they actually tell us in the same histories they tell us about them. They also tell us in ways that they were using clothing, they were hunting using weapons, attacking, not just like sneaking in and grabbing people, but literally warfare with the natives. That's the kind of thing. Now we have seen panels that show Bigfoots and natives fighting, but the Bigfoots still just look like Bigfoot. They're coming in a group, punched. Some are quad, some are erect, and all the natives have weapons and they don't. They're just coming in full blown. And that's not what we've been taught and told about those types of giants, what was found, like in Lovelock and the other red-haired giants.
Absolutely. I also heard that the red-haired giants were miners. Like up where I'm
Right.
from, like Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan and stuff, you hear a lot about they were not copper miners, I think.
Yeah, copper for the most part. They were doing gold, silver, and everything else, zinc and all that too. But yeah, copper was the big deal. So the world, or the Great Lakes region, fueled the copper for the planet. And the tin for the Bronze Age, there's no tin source in Europe that could have equated to the Bronze Age. That tin had to have come from South America and probably at Lake Titicaca, because even the word Titicaca means tin mine in Babylonian. So Titi is tin, Caca is mine. So Titicaca tin mine. And that is the world's largest source of tin is from that region. And then we find Babylonian tools and idols and things like that on the island in Lake Titicaca. So what we're looking for is to fuel an age of bronze, is you're looking for copper from the Great Lakes, tin from South America. In both locations, giants were the ones said to have built and done everything and run everybody and were the rulers. Same with the mound builders in Ohio and all these regions up there. What do we find in the mounds? We find the remains of giants. In South America, the red-haired giants ruled and did everything down there. So what it denotes is a global organized mining, resource, and trade network that was put together by red-haired giants of one type or another, be it Nephilim or whatever. And that's probably what it should be, because they had global dominion and control, and they were the ones that invented and brought metallurgy to mankind. So it only goes to figure that's what we're finding is the remnants of the exact same, stories, myths, and legends from around the planet. And I think the USA is probably the best repository for that evidence. It's also, most heavily concealed, out of all the mounds that existed, how many are gone? I mean, it's like 80-90% of them were just wiped completely off the map without even logging them. And there was a concerted effort to do that. These things were not a mistake. They don't want that to be out, because, like I said, they're all interconnected. And if you start asking questions about one thing, you're going to ask questions about another. It's like just, hey, shut up, move along. There's nothing to see here. And that's why it's not like there's a little to see here, because then you're going to look more. There's nothing to see here. So.
Mm-hmm. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier too. How history is written by the winners and stuff. There's all these articles and legitimate newspaper clippings and stuff of the giant skeletons being unearthed and found throughout Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio, and stuff where we were talking. And now there was no skeletons. They completely deny all that. But where did these pictures come from? It's not like they had Photoshop, back in, the 1800s or whatever, when they were making these newspapers and stuff, that they just disappeared,
Yeah. And when you have, and it's not like one article or two articles and someone's being creative, hundreds and hundreds of articles. And when you have Abraham Lincoln even quoting that there was a race of giants here, I mean, he makes that statement that what we're seeing is the remnants of the race of giants. And they talked about, even commenting on Niagara Falls, that to think that at some day the race of giants looked upon these falls as we look on them today. All these things were spoken, and it was not hidden until a certain date. It's same thing with Bigfoot. It wasn't being concealed and covered up until 1974. And by 1975, it was a myth and a legend. Before that, it wasn't a myth and a legend. Even in the news and with the FBI and the Army Corps of Engineers, we've all seen, their sheet for flora and fauna in the area, and it shows a Bigfoot. And we all know that the FBI was involved in hair studies and things in the early 70s. It wasn't mythological. You can see when that occurred. And so at one point or another, world media and those in the know and in the funding decided, no, this isn't one of these things we're gonna keep going forward with. This is one of the things that's now myth, and that's what we see as well. If it can remain a myth, or if you have all types of fanciful ideas, they'll throw you right on TV. If you get close to the truth and leave it in a simplistic reality that speaks for itself, man, they avoid you like a 20-foot pole. I mean, it's insane how you can get shunned, even by the people that are involved in this, doing this stuff. A lot of those don't want that answer either, because a lot of their persona comes from the mystery. If the question gets answered, what are they going to talk about? What are they going to do? Because seldom do you see them discussing understandings and true research into the species. They're all researching the question and what would you say? Repeating the same answers and basically patting each other on the back and saying, good job, which is all great. It's all human. But at the same time, we're not seeing the reality of it. We're not seeing the hardcore. Who are they? What do they do? What time they get up? How do they act? Do they get sick? What makes them sick? What do they do when they get sick? We don't see any of that stuff. And these are not the glorious parts of the being, these are the things that most are overlooked. A lot of people don't even want to know all that stuff. They want the fanciful mystery. They want that going on. And I think that there's a lot of inherent fear that will be lost once the answers are out. And I don't think that'll be the case. I think it'll be like anything else, where more correct, in-depth, actual study into who they are, what they do, where they came from, things like that will actually be conducted, because that's what'll be left. Right now it's all, he saw one over there, she saw one over there, so they must be real. And this is being repeated just over and over and run into the ground. And stories are awesome. I love to hear stories. But you don't hear us relate, if ever, many stories. Very seldom do we tell you what somebody else saw or what somebody else told us. And what we're trying to relate is what we've witnessed and what we've been able to record in repetition. So the habits of these things and where they're going, what they're doing, who they are, where they came from, on all these, like, what do they do when they get sick? Everything gets sick, and so, I think in the overall, we're coming against a wall. And I think that a lot of people probably feel that in the Bigfoot world. And it's the same wall archaeology hit 200 years ago. And we're hitting that wall now, and we're hitting it pretty hard, to where everything we're doing is coming into a space where there's nothing being generated or birthed by it. There's no next generation of where does this go from here. We're just doing the same thing. Well, we're up against the wall spinning our wheels. And that means a change needs to occur. And usually that's in the understanding and approach of the people, right? And I think if people would stop trying to put answers to the questions. You can answer a question, that's great, but don't put an answer to try to fit the question. Let the answer happen. And if you don't have one, it's an I don't know. And so, but like I said, most of the stages are held up by people that want to discuss other people's findings and then offer their own viewpoint and opinion on that and interpretation. So we're not seeing a lot of discovery like we should be. Finding tracks it's discovery, but what is it telling you about that? Where did it come from? Where did it go? What speed was it walking? How was it upright? Was it down? Why was the reasons for all these things? That's what I think we need to be doing. That's where our wheels will gain traction moving forward. Not, cool, man, I found prints. Look at me, I'm a badass. It's like, and I get it. It feels awesome to find prints. I want to take pictures and show everybody too. But that's not good enough at the end of the day. That's not good enough at the end of the day. We need, like Steve Isdall says, we need more than that. That's not where you stop. Everybody's got prints. They're not that hard to find once you get good at doing it. Even good photography, bad photography, all that's kind of irrelevant to developing an understanding like a study actually does. A study doesn't really care about all that stuff. A study just keeps logging information and keeps logging information, and it sees commonalities and differences, and that takes you down avenues of understanding. Without that, you never gain an understanding. And so it's a little tough, actually. It's tough to get the answers. It's tough to provide the answers. People don't want the answers. Because, well, that's going to interfere with my supposition and my interview I did last year, or the presentation I did last year. What you're finding now doesn't fit that presentation, so I'm going to ignore it and move along, and I don't want to hear about you anymore because that was in my book, and now my book will be wrong. It's like, so these we're approaching a wall that's got to break at one point or another, I believe. Mm-hmm. We'll see.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Like you just said, people are so worried, if we discover Bigfoot, if it's proven to exist, nobody's going to care about it anymore. And I listen to a lot of Cliff and Bobo's podcasts, and they go, well, I don't think that's true, because how many people watch Shark Week every year? Here's an animal that is 100% known to exist, and there's an entire week of programming dedicated to it that people watch religiously. And now you're saying, well, if we discover Bigfoot, which is hugely popular right now, and if we discover it, no one's going to care anymore. Well, that's just not true. You're going to tune in for an entire week.
But what happens? Right. But what happens is people are not going to care about certain people anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They'll care about the Bigfoot. That's not going to go away. Now, this is an excuse. Well, no one's going to care about the Bigfoot if this. No. They won't care about maybe your interpretation of the Bigfoot. What's going to happen is the value is going to be on the people getting the answers, and taking the simplistic, true to fact view and methodology and study nature where they're not in the middle of it. Their opinion doesn't mean anything anymore, because now we're up to the research point. We're past opinion. That's what's scary to people, is them being removed from the limelight or being insignificant compared to the reality. So as long as it's not a reality, they can be the important thing. As soon as it's reality, Bigfoot becomes the important thing, and not so much all the people talking about it. So that's our brick wall right now. That's our brick wall. That's like the same thing in presentations. You saw me in Michigan. Well, I get very, very little speaking arrangements other than that. Yet the people that saw me up in Michigan said that I blew their socks off. They said they've never heard or seen anything like that before. And it was by far the best presentation of the event. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm telling you what people told me after the show and what people have written and told me since then. And it's not that I'm better or worse than anybody else or know or any more or less. All I did, though, was go up and tell information and let the information show and speak for itself about their behavior and habits and what's been dictated throughout that evidence, both trace and physical. Not my take on it, my opinion on it. And so there is a closed door on the edge of that stage in most, in most, what would you say? Not platforms, but in most of these aspects of the presentation society, there isn't room for that. People want to hear opinion, or no, I guess not that they want to hear it, but those that are delivering it or setting up to are still doing the popular thing, what they believe people are going to find most entertaining. And what I'm finding is people want what's most informative. They do have an attention span. They will sit for 3 hours. They absolutely will. We do a 3-hour presentation and people go, man, we could have done this for hours more. And it's like, I stop them at one point because, they're going to get mundane and they're going to drag on and everyone's just sitting there on the edge of their seat. Well, there's a reason for that, because they're getting information that their brain can use to decipher and interpret, not have that interpretation done for them by someone else who has ideas and opinions. So I think that it's important to open up these stages for that, just more so for the people that are not popularized and they don't care to be popularized, that are just doing their thing. And, on my end, I get a lot of contacts and information from people that are doing that, no one knows their name. Nobody knows their name. They're doing this on their end for the right reasons. And being as they're doing it for the right reasons, no one's going to hear about them. And digging these guys out and bringing them up and putting them on the forefront. So basically, we've got a stage that was open access, and you have all the, and I love everyone on this. I've got great friends that do presentations all the time, and I love every single one of them. But as a general, we end up with those on stage who want to be on stage. And what we really need is the guys who don't want to be on stage, because they're the guys who have everything. We need to drag those guys in and make them get on stage. That's kind of how I feel about myself. I make myself do it. I'm not comfortable speaking, even though people say, oh, you speak really well, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not comfortable doing it. It's not something that I would have ever chose to do, is go up in front of a group of people and say anything. But the drive to answer these questions, the drive to bring the realistic viewpoint, the drive to bring study and research to the people is greater than my fear of standing up before them. And, I feel not just vindicated, but very driven, especially the more we see versus the more we hear, the more I feel driven to get up there and say, hey, look, man, here's the deal. And I'll just show you. I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to show you all this stuff. And so, personally ourselves, I want to get and speak more, because I want to. Why would all these efforts I've done over all these years, I don't want those efforts to be wasted. The reason we're doing it is to bring understanding to the people, because this understanding brings a greater view on all of it as a whole, everything in the paranormal and a lot of the stuff in the normal. Is clarified through this stuff, and that's what I want to do, is bring that up. And I mean, a big portion of it is I want to make everybody question their reality, so you can as well question the reality of the Creator and God. I think it comes back to that, and I think that's the mainstay fear, is any of the stuff that gets out is going to come back to the potential existence of a Creator, and you don't want that. You don't want physical vindication of a Creator. At least the powers that be don't necessarily want that, because in that becomes something that all the people can gather with and have great strength and great power collectively. But for us, that's why we do it. We do it to shed light, to bring understanding, lift the veil, wake people up, rub the sleep out of their eyes, get them to look at the world and realize, wow, the wonder isn't gone. Everything wasn't found. There's still things to discover and explore and know. And that's why we're always told, no, don't go look over there. Everything's been studied. Everything's been found. There's nothing new. You got PBS and now all kinds of archaeologists all over the world going off on Graham Hancock. And they're actually trying to bring him up for like global charges for disinformation, because his research is racist, because he believes that there was an advanced culture at the time of what they call the Younger Dryas or the World Flood event, whatever. And that is threatening them so much, they're going on a global campaign against the guy now. What do you mean? We're digging up the evidence of it, and all he's showing is the evidence of it. But why is that so scary? Well, because it relates histories, what we call myth and folklore, as reality. Those same histories dictate all kinds of things they are not comfortable with us knowing, starting with a Creator, going on to many, many other cultures visiting our planet, helping and hurting people, ruling over people, the different humans that evolved with us, and what might have happened to them, what might have happened to us, how advanced were we, how feeble are we as a species. All these things come to light when you begin to answer any of these questions. So.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate all of your stuff and all of your work. Like I said, I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts and interviews and that, and it's just fascinating. And we could go on all day here, but eventually I have to go to my day job. So, but thank you so much for coming on. And if you can tell everybody again where you can find you on YouTube and all of your stuff.
Yeah, on YouTube, we're KX Kryder Exploration. And then we also have sites all over Facebook. We have KryderExploration.com website, but we still don't have a lot of information and stuff in there yet. But it does show kind of who we are, talk about our services and what we do. And there is a little bit of stuff in the database there. And we're on Facebook. We have a group called Kryder Exploration. We have another called KX Cryptid. What's K? Well, I think you can find it just by going KX Cryptid. Bigfoot and More, I think it's called. That's our cryptid Facebook page, and then we also have we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're all over the place, but we seldom use those platforms. So usually it's best to find us here on YouTube or on Facebook for now, as far as that goes. And I want everybody to feel free to reach out and contact us. We're really, really open about what we know, and we want to learn more. We're not interested in learning where your sites are or anything happened or where your encounter. We just don't care, because we have plenty of our own. We're never out shopping anybody else's, because I've got so much I can hand out research locations to everybody else, which I don't mind doing that either. So, but if anyone likes to, catch up on us or whatever, we've also got a merch store you can find in the description on our videos. That really helps us out a lot. I think we make like $10 a t-shirt that comes out of there, which is really, really cool. And I want to say thank you to all our Patreon supporters, because although we don't have many, they're very, very loyal and very dedicated to what we do. And they sure wait an awful long time for us to put out what others would call content. Of course, we're not content creators, so we're doing it for real. So as it comes up, we can give it to the people. But I just want to say thank you so, so much to those guys who have stuck with us. Without you, we would not be able to continue an online presence. They don't quite cover just what our online costs are, but it's real close. And I just wanted to, without that, we wouldn't be able to do some of this. And I'm not just saying that. Between our websites and all the features, functions, and protections and all this stuff, I mean, we're looking like $160 a month just in keeping our data up online and keeping everything rolling. So, like I said, I really want to say I appreciate that. And as well, you know, I'm going to encourage everybody on our channel to stick with Monday Morning Monsters and Barnaby here and follow these guys up and stay with them, keep tuned. You know, these are great guys trying to do the right thing. So appreciate that as well.
You also make the long duration, or not long duration, the listening devices as well, correct?
Yeah, I was the inventor of the KXPD3 parabolic microphone, which works on an entirely new audio theorem that we call acoustic fluid technology. I designed and developed that actually for Boyd Omer, a great guy. He does BFRO research. I don't care who likes him or not. Some of their guys are tremendous people. Boyd's one of them. He asked me to build him a dish. And so I put a bunch of theory behind it and tried something new, and it paid off. And so with that equipment, we can listen to a human speaking at a mile and a human yelling at 5 miles. And so we're about 5 to 10 times the range of even a $3,000 Kohler dish. And so what they can do with a 27-inch dish, we can do 5 times more with a 12-inch dish. And yeah, they're basically indestructible. We build them to be able to take a 30-foot fall, drop out of the car doing 30 mile an hour. It's not going to really hurt it. Not the main frame and dish and things like that. So, all aerospace stuff. And, so we've moved up pretty good to that. But if people want more information on that, they can go watch us on Facebook, go into our sites there. I don't advertise it. I've never promoted it on YouTube yet, besides a mention like this. But yeah, I want people to look into that too. There's other technologies and things we've worked on, super, super high intensity IR, 940 nanometer IR and stuff like that we use. But yeah. So we invent and sell those. And I encourage people to check those out if they can find them. We've got them listed on our website. And there's an equipment listing there in KXPD3. And if you're going to get one, get them now, because with what prices just did to us, getting the materials and the manufacturing and stuff done has almost doubled since we started. And we have not raised prices. So we're working on dirt right now. So I'm going to have to go up on prices. So if anybody wants one, you better get one now. So
awesome.
I appreciate that plug too. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you.
Definitely. Well, like I said, I've been following you since, I saw you in Michigan. So awesome. I appreciate your work. Thank you so much for what you do. And I'm sure if you got time, I'd love to have you back on and continue the conversation sometime. So
yeah, absolutely. Be my pleasure. And I appreciate it, Barnaby. Thanks for thinking of me and the consideration and having me speak.
Definitely, man. Well, I look forward to seeing you out there in the field again sometime and having you back on. And until next time, guys, I'm Barnaby from Cryptids Anomalies and the Paranormal Society, and my guest, Robert Kryder from Kryder Exploration.
See you guys.
See you later, guys.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTK-DB.com.